was very old that had been buried for a long time. And,
Oh,
but the experiencing new things, new creations, new things that are out there. I mean, just it kind of goes with what I was just talking about before, the journey. It's just another part of the high of adventuring and feeling this world out.
and then the last thing was the stories they hold. And I think that ties into some of what you just said.
Yeah, but this is a little different. What I'm referring to here is, almost kind of like the phrase of if the walls could talk. You hear old timers say that all the time.
Right.
If the wall would be a fly on the wall. These walls, these old buildings, they have stories. They've seen crazy things, and that's a little more what I'm referring to. And sometimes these places, hold both unsolved mysteries or untold mysteries. Again, I think we were talking about on the break a little bit of things that just never have come out, that have occurred to people because of the time period it occurred in. This day and age, we have a lot of abilities to, voice our opinions, to let people know when we're victims. Many times in history and in the past, and in different parts of the world, none of that could happen. And you could be a victim and no one cared, or no one would do anything about it. And, those type of things with walls to talk, well, that's part of researching and figuring that stuff out, investigating those things, finding out what, occurred in these places. And then once in a while, as an investigator, we come across a case, that you're trying to investigate and figure out and put the pieces back together from a bygone era, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is for sure. And for example, there are a lot of abandoned ghost towns throughout America from the railroad era, when, like in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, like in Wisconsin, for example. There's a ghost town, probably, I want to say just a little over an hour from here. Nobody knows about it. And that's because this town was literally established on a railway, the first railway to come through, which, like, I think it was, 30 years later, they came through, a different railway came through, and they reestablished a new set of tracks, and they pulled up the old set. And that town literally ceased to exist overnight. And you can still go there, and the foundations are there, and the chimneys are there, and make sure you go with somebody, because even the holes from the outhouses are still there. You don't want to fall into one of them, right? But
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and they're dotted all over, and you never hear about them, and people don't talk about the and for us, they're treasures.
Yeah.
It's
like the cemetery up here that we found, Wolfsgram.
Yeah.
That's completely abandoned, and it's in the woods. And unless, what it is you it's in a little town. You go across the street to this Catholic cemetery. You literally have to walk for a little bit in the woods to get to it. If you didn't know where to go, you would have no idea that cemetery was even there, and it's completely abandoned.
75 years.
Yeah. Abandoned is awesome. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it is. And on sites like that. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, we're having kind of a modern abandonment going on. I don't know if you guys have paid attention to this, as our economy shifts to a different type of consumer, and we're seeing the death of malls and strip malls and large companies such as department stores, and so you get these monstrous buildings that are lying empty, and kind of creating their own abandoned modern era. And it's literally happening before our eyes.
Yeah, that reminds me of like the cataphiles or different cultures that actually evolve around
Yeah, because we subscribe on YouTube to a couple of channels that do urban exploration, and some of the stuff they find is amazing. Like we watched this one couple that do it, and they went into a literal abandoned hospital, and this hospital still had its electricity on and left every single piece of equipment that it had. So when they left this hospital, they never even took any of that equipment. And you know that all that equipment is just like more than a pretty penny.
It was at that time, for
It was
sure.
at that time,
right,
for
yeah.
sure.
But yeah, the things that some people leave behind also. And you think like some of these beautiful buildings and you think, there were men who probably spent years at some of these locations working every day, doing their craft, doing their trade, working on an amazing, beautiful building that, for whatever reason, all of a sudden nobody wants to use anymore. And it goes, and, it's just to think that, like you said, if the walls could talk, some of this they would have. And, it's interesting you bring up talking walls. The last Paralogian report we did, we had one of the stories we covered was they're actually building smart walls now, where they put these like little tiny bits into the paint that can transmit, and they're attempting to turn a wall into like an equivalent of a touch screen, for example.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and when they asked the guy, one of the engineers on this project, he said, well, talking, if the walls could talk, we thought it'd be a great idea. So we're setting out to do just that. Now, on one hand, it sounds really cool, right? On the other hand, it's really invasive, depending on who's in charge of the power of that or the control of that. So it's kind of, on one hand, it's cool, but on the other hand, it's very dangerous, I think.
Well, you got to be careful because you don't know, who or what you can encounter on Explorers and what you may find that you don't necessarily want to find.
Ooh. And that's it. Have you ever come across anything like that, Jax? Anything that sticks out in your mind?
I come across so many things, but you always have the abuse of power, which is always, whenever you have that, people have power, they're always going to abuse it. So, that happens all the time. In fact, that's usually why things end up getting abandoned. In Butte, Montana, you had all the, it was a booming, one of the largest cities of America, which you would never know by looking at it now, but it all went up in flames as people abused their power and literally would start fires for the insurance. And so you run into those kind of things all the time.
Yeah. So, let's see, what time do we got? Oh, we still have a few minutes before our next break. So, of the places that you've been since, well, let me ask you this, because you go to a lot of cool places. What's your favorite place or the place that I guess really
stuck with you?
Oh, that's a hard one. It's hard when you have, I've been allowed to go to places that are quite varied. And I'm a kind of person that I embrace change and just love doing new things and seeing new things. Obviously, Arizona and Montana and Alaska are my three states that I hold a lot of, love in. I'd probably say Montana is my favorite place to be in. If I could be there year round. But it's hard to say because I just love doing so many different things. I've, been in old abandoned prisons in Ohio and in insane asylums and all these different places. And it's like each one is so unique and you come away from it with such a unique experience, if you're open up to it and that you love. Obviously, my place that I love being is the mountains, and that doesn't always necessarily afford, abandoned places, but the mountains to me just have so much majesty to them. And so places like Alaska and Montana obviously have my heart because there's so many mountains. I go out to upstate New York quite frequently due to family being out there, and it's just nice and flat. It's really green, but as you start looking at the horizon, I miss those mountains because they say it's almost like those are speaking too. They're large pieces in our sky, but mountains are alive and well with their water and elements that are inside of them. And just a big part of me is just enjoying nature and being up on a mountain. And there's quite a few things you come across in mountains that are very strange too. Old encampments and mines and all kinds of stuff like that that can be a lot of fun. So that's definitely where I like going the most. But I just enjoy going to do new things. I mean, I get called all the time. Hey, you want to come to this state and go do this with me? I'll hop on a plane and go do it with you if I can. And it's just to experience something new.
That's cool.
So I guess ultimately I'd say my answer is probably just anything new.
Right. Well, that's a good answer.
That is a very good answer.
And I know it's a tough question. If someone would ask me that same question, I would struggle with it too. There's so many places and different things stick out at different times. But with as far as the mountains, that's majestic.
Yeah.
And the biggest mountains I've ever seen, and I guess I don't know if you'd even call them mountains, would be Tennessee and the Black Hills. Because I've never been west of the Mississippi, and I've never been east of Cleveland. So, but when I see pictures or video of like the Rockies or the Himalayas or the Andes, it's just amazing. And trying to put myself in that spot on, like, when I look at a picture or a video and think how awesome it is,
Oh yeah. It makes you feel like in your place in the world too. I think sometimes when you're roaming around the city, and you're just this part of this big machine, and maybe even feel like, it gives you a little too much, you're too much, you think you're too big in your own self. But when you get on top of a mountain by yourself, you realize what a speck you are in this world. How tiny and insignificant ultimately you are in the scheme of things. Where I think sometimes living in the city, you get, just too big for our own britches, and we don't know quite what to do with it. And then you get out in nature and you realize, wow, okay, time to humble yourself.
Okay, everybody, and with that, it is time for our next commercial break. You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We will be right back with our guest for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.